So Luke and Acts coming up. That's your homework assignment. In the meantime, it's sad today because today is the last reading of Mark. And we won't hear Mark again for 3 more years. So Mark has come to an end today. Now, it's appropriate that we end the Gospel of Mark here in Mark chapter 13. What is Mark chapter 13? It's called the Little Apocalypse. Little Apocalypse. Now, why is this interesting? First of all, apocalyptic literature is fascinating. I was hoping to win the lottery a few weeks ago, 1.6 billion. I was going to take my little trailer that I'm working on, bring it to Arkansas, and spend the rest of my life studying apocalyptic literature. You can go off the deep end, very easy on this stuff, right? And I've been studying apocalyptic literature, I don't know, for maybe 40 years now. I'm very interested in this topic. So whenever I hit this, it's like, wow, this is fascinating stuff here. So what is this all about? Apocalyptic literature has several important categories. First of all, it's black and white, good guys and bad guys. There's no in between. And it has to do with end times, wars and rumors of wars, big picture stuff, macro picture stuff. Okay? Now, Mark chapter 13 is interesting in that it's in the Gospel of Mark. And what is Mark? The oldest of the 4 Gospels in the New Testament. So Christians have been writing and thinking about the end or apocalyptic literature since the very beginning of the Christian religion. Now, the classic place you want to point to for apocalyptic literature is Daniel. Karen read Daniel. Okay? That's Old Testament apocalyptic literature. And then, of course, the book of Revelation that was written in 95 AD. That's the last book of the New Testament. But here we have kind of the whole book of Revelation boiled down in this. It's 37 verses long, Mark chapter 13. There's 37 verses, and it's called the Little Apocalypse. So this is only the beginning of it. It goes on and on. So let's deal with what we have here. Now, so here we go. Jesus comes to the temple. Stop. The temple. Is this of interest to us? Oh, it's really interesting to us. Now, let me take this down here. This is one of my all-time favorite charts, right? Where does this come from? It comes from the well-known lunatic religious publication, the National Geographic. So in other words, this is secular stuff. It's nothing to do with religion. Now, this is based on archaeology. This is one of the archaeological hotspots for the entire world. And let's start here, right here, okay? This is what it looks like now. This is called the Dome of the Rock. What is that? The 3rd holiest site in Islam. Mecca, Medina, and the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. Now, who wants to start World War III? Yeah, that's a good idea. All you have to do is to scrape this off the Temple Mount and build a Jewish temple here, right? The Islamic world would lose their minds. Now, is there any plans to build a Jewish temple on the Temple Mount? Yes. There's ultra-Orthodox Jews in Jerusalem that already have the materials ready to go. And they've been working on a special plan for about 50 years to breed a red heifer that has no white hairs on it at all. And they achieved this a couple of years ago. So it's a completely red heifer. Now, why is that important? The red heifer has to be sacrificed, and the ashes have to be used to consecrate the new temple and rededicate the temple when they rebuild the temple. They already have the gold menorah, all the temple vessels, everything is ready to go. They're just waiting for this to disappear. Now, why is this spot important? This is a spot where Islamic people believe that Abraham almost sacrificed who? Ishmael. Remember Genesis 22? So if Ishmael is the child of promise, then that means Islam is true and Christianity and Judaism are wrong. We know that Isaac was almost sacrificed here. This is also the place where the rock, what rock is it? It's the rock that was the Holy of Holies in King Solomon's temple. So when you read this, and Jesus came to the temple, what is it? This is what they would have seen. And this temple is built by Herod the Great. Now again, without doing a 3-hour lecture, who's Herod the Great? He's an Idumean, a descendant of Esau. The Romans picked him to be their lackey, their guy who's going to govern this region. And they gave him the title King of the Jews. Why did Herod the Great massacre the children in Bethlehem when Jesus is born? That's Christmas coming up here in several weeks. Because he heard rumors that the king of the Jews is born in Bethlehem. He's jealous of losing his power. That King Herod. These people, Hitler's the same way. He's a maniac, but he likes to build things. Herod is like this. He's a maniac. He likes to build things. Nero, a maniac who likes to build things. Always be careful of people like this, right? So he's building this temple. How long did it take? It started in 20 BC, and they finished building it in 63 BC. And when did Jesus talk? When is this? 33 AD. So, I'm sorry, 63 AD. So, okay, let me get the date. They started 20 BC. They finished it in 63 AD. Jesus says this in 33 AD. So the temple was still under construction when Jesus was talking today. Okay? So, let me flip this real quick. So, they come to the temple from where? Galilee, 75 miles to the north. And who are the apostles of Jesus? They're country people. They're peasants from rural Galilee. And they come to Jerusalem, and what do they see? Fantastic, amazing architecture. I mean, imagine, you live in a little hut on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and you're a fisherman, and you walk to Jerusalem, and here you see the holy city. This beautiful architecture, this project that even the Romans are known for amazing building, right? The Colosseum in Rome and so on. Even they were stunned by the temple in Jerusalem, the architecture involved. So they come to the temple, and the disciples, they say, "Teacher, look at these large stones," right? These huge buildings, mega buildings, right? And what does Jesus say? See these buildings? Look around here, right? Not one stone shall be left upon another. He said this in 33 AD. Okay. Now, is Jesus right about this or not? Yes. August 10th, 70 AD, this temple right here, it was only completed in 63 AD. It stood for 7 years, finished, and the 10th, 12th, and 15th Roman legion destroyed the temple, and they scraped all the rocks and they threw it off the edge. And I've been to Israel. Nancy Paul's been there. When you walk along this side of the temple right here, there's a street, a carta it's called. It's a roadway. And the stones were thrown from up here down to the carta, and they smashed the street. And the stones are gigantic. They're engineers. They're good at destroying things. And not one stone is left upon another. How big are some of the stones? Some of these stones are gigantic. 37 feet long, 18 feet high, 12 feet deep. And they don't even know how they moved them. It would be like 200 tons or something. I mean, amazing rocks. And they moved this to build this temple. And Jesus says, not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down off the Temple Mount. And they did. Okay? Now, when they get to the Temple Mount, or when they get to the Mount of Olives, stop. Remember, we're lucky here. We have our church here. So, the altar is the temple. This is the Temple Mount. It's a raised platform. And then over here on this wall is the Mount of Olives. Remember, it's 1 mile from here to where that cross is. 1 mile. In here is called the Kidron Valley. So you have to come down off this mountain, through the Kidron Valley, to enter the holy city over here. Palm Sunday. Jesus did this on Palm Sunday. Okay? Bethany is over here, the corner of that quilt. So you get your bearings here. They're sitting over here. And there's a panorama of the temple and the entire city of Jerusalem. Right? You can see the whole thing right over there. The choirs, that's the city of Jerusalem. They're sitting there looking. This is called the Mount Olivet Discourse because they're on the Mount of Olives. Mount Olivet Discourse. So they're sitting there, and Jesus then, they have a question. And what's the question? Well, first of all, it's a private question from Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Stop. Who are they? Peter and Andrew are fishermen. James and John, sons of Zebedee. Remember, James and John are cousins of Jesus, like your brother in the Middle East. Okay, John, who wrote the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Revelation. That's John. Okay? So they asked Jesus privately. This is inside teaching. One of the hallmarks of apocalyptic literature is this. You know what shamanism is? You know what shamanism is? Like, there's a line here, okay? You're on this side and you're awake and you fall asleep and you have dreams. You go over here and you dream and then you wake up and then you say, I had the weirdest dream last night. All right? That's shamanism. Except shamanism is even more extreme. You have a near-death experience. You died and you saw heaven and you met people and you come back and you tell people about it. So this is a major religion in like Mongolia. Native Americans are shamanistic. Apocalyptic literature is kind of like that, where you go to heaven and you look around and you come back and give a report about it. The book of Enoch is like this. Okay? So what's on the other side? That's apocalyptic literature. Here we have a secret teaching, a private teaching. So Peter, James, and John asked Jesus, okay, give us the inside scoop here. Tell us what's on the other side. Tell us what we can't see. Okay? So this is apocalyptic literature. This is why we're interested in this. We want to know, like, what's over here, right? Well, they said, tell us, when will this be? When? Okay, stop. Is this a problem? Yeah, when is a huge problem. Everybody wants to know, when is the end going to be? Do we know the end? No, we don't know the end, which is probably a good idea. Because if you knew the world's going to end, say January 1st, you'd probably max out your credit cards and do all kinds of strange things. Get that tattoo you've always dreamed about, right? In other words, you do all kinds of odd things. When is it going to end? It's going to end when God wants it to end. Can you accelerate the end? No. Can you contribute to the end? No. You have to wait for God to pull the plug. It's not up to you or your organization or your philosophy to pull the plug. Okay? So when is it going to be? Have there been a lot of people that have set dates to the end and have been incorrect? Yeah, we live in New York. What's good about New York? We have every lunatic that's ever lived in the form of religion coming from New York. Joseph Smith from Palmyra, New York, the Mormons. William Miller, my favorite. He's from Lowhampton, New York, which is up by Rutland, Vermont. William Miller was a War of 1812 veteran of the Battle of Plattsburgh, right? He's a deist. He believes God made the heaven and the earth, and he elects the creator, but he doesn't think that God intervenes in history. He's a deist. Many people during the American Revolution were deists. George Washington probably was, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, right? They weren't Orthodox Christians like we are. So he's like this, right? So what happens? His friend who's next to him gets killed in action, in combat, and he lives. Today we would call this PTSD. What did he do about it? He went back to his farm and he started reading the King James Bible. He started reading and reading and reading, and all of a sudden he notices certain dates pop up, certain times pop up, 3.5 years, 7 years, this kind of stuff. Well, he's a rationalist, he's a deist, and he starts adding up the numbers. This is always a dangerous thing. This is why, again, we shouldn't let engineers read the Bible, because they start adding up the numbers. No. Sometimes numbers are symbolic. They're not meant to be literally. So the bottom line is, he says, the strangest thing, I'm reading Daniel and I'm reading Revelation and Daniel and I'm adding up. According to my calculations, the world is going to end October 23rd, 1843. So he told one of his friends, that his friend said, I have a Bible study, would you come and give a talk? Sure. So we give a little talk about it. Then all of a sudden, this is sensational. It becomes a major trans-denominational religious movement in upstate New York and New England. Right? Or right here. Right? So people who are Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, they would go to these meetings to learn about when the end of the world is going to be. Well, what happened? The date came around, and guess what? No Jesus, no second coming. So then he says, wait a minute, let me recalculate here. They always want to recalculate, right? I was off by 1 year. Why is that? Because if you go 4 BC, 3 BC, 2 BC, 1 BC, there's no year 0. It's 1 AD, 2 AD, okay? No, he was off by 1 year. So he said 1844, October 23rd, 1844. So guess what happens? Farmers didn't plant their crops. Yeah. People sold everything they had. They bought like white robes like this, and they stood on mountaintops and they waited for Jesus to come. October 23rd comes along, and guess what happens? Nothing. So a lot of people said, forget this. I don't believe in God anymore. This is what happens when you set dates, right? People get the date of the calculator confused with the Word of God. Jesus tells you don't set dates. No one knows the time the time of my second coming, the month of the year. Nobody knows that. So anybody who gets on TV today, they got on TV. I love this too. The world's going to end next week. Send me all of your money. They said, wait a minute now. If the world's going to end, you won't be needing money, will you? Right? No, they always want you to send you the money. It's a very strange thing. So whenever you hear people setting dates, turn and run the other way. It's not a good idea. Okay? So Peter, Andrew, James, they want to know, when is it going to be? Right? And a lot of Christians for the last 2,000 years have gotten into big trouble by trying to set dates and try to go around and tell people the dates are coming. Jehovah's Witnesses are famous for this. They predicted the end of the world the last time in 1975. They did 1914, 1918, 1925. Then I forgot it in between. 1975 was the last one. And of course, they purge all of their literature so that they take the dates out now. But if you go back and say, well, I have some collector's item, Jehovah's Witnesses Watchtower material, and you said the world's going to end in 1925. We're still here, right? So they don't talk about that. All right, so when is this going to be? And what signs when all these things are about to be accomplished? In other words, what are the signs that are going to happen? Okay. Again, I'll never forget. Harold Camping predicted the end of the world. I think it was 2002, something like that. I forget the exact date. And I was teaching in the city at the time, and my students wanted to know if they had to hand their papers in, because the world was supposed to end in October or whatever year it was. I said, even if the world ends, your paper has to be handed in. Nobody gets away from it. I've heard great excuses, from the students. Dog ate my homework. No, the world ended. I don't care if the world ends or not. You got to get your paper in, right? So they were banking on the world ending rather than having to write the paper. Figure this one out, right? The writing is a painful thing, right? So when is it going to be? So Jesus said to them, he said, beware, right? Jesus had many great things, but this is probably something that you should probably etch in stone and put it over the door of your house or something. Beware that no one leads you astray. Now see that word astray? He mentions it again, down a couple words. They will lead you astray. He says it twice in 2 verses. When Jesus repeats himself, what does it mean? Repetition means it's important. He's highlighting it. Beware that they lead you astray. In other words, you want to have a high degree of skepticism when it comes to end time stuff. Well, what do? You believe in Jesus, period. You don't believe in Jesus plus the people that are ranting and raving about apocalyptic events. Don't get your faith messed up, right? It's not the church, it's Jesus that saves you. It's not the brilliant teachers, the articulate teachers that have airtime on TV. They're not the ones that save you. Christ saves you. Again, people lost their faith because the date setters were wrong. Harold Camping, right? Again, he's on the radio, he's talking, he's an engineer, he sounds really rational. Well, there are, people that, one guy sold all of his, liquidated his 401k plan, and he bought big billboards in Times Square, and to get people to wake up, the world's going to end in a couple of weeks. People lost their faith because of this stuff. And again, it's not, Jesus tells the truth. The Bible is the Word of God. We believe the Bible. But when it comes to people that interpret the Bible, have a high degree of skepticism. This is why, as Christians, what do we believe? Lutherans, sola scriptura. It means you read the Bible. You think about the Bible. You are the one who the priesthood of all believers, right? It's not the minister or the preacher that's the head of the church. Christ is the head of the church, and you are his people. The strength of Protestantism is the people of God, not the great leader. Leaders are wrong. They lead people astray. Jesus says, beware of these people, right? Many will come in my name, saying, I am he. Now, you know, when I teach, I'm up here talking about some obscure economics stat or something, or some economics point. What do the kids do now? They all have iPhones. Who knew, right? I have one of those jitterbug flip phones from AARP magazine, you know? Well, they have iPhones. So what do? While you're up there talking, they're verifying the stuff that you're saying. They're looking it up on their iPhones. So you can't lie to these students anymore. You have to be accurate from now on. It's a terrible burden for me, right? So you can't exaggerate. You have to give exact, because they look it up while you're sitting there talking, right? So I said, okay, two can play this game. So I'm sitting here going, okay, Jesus tells me, many will come in my name and say, I am he. In other words, I'm the Messiah. So what do? Google search. Here it is. A 17-page list of the people that in history that have claimed to be Christ or the Messiah. Wow. 17 pages, right? And I'd like to read all 17 pages to you at this time. Right? Well, they're in main groupings. First of all, there are Jewish messiahs, right? The Jews that claim to be the Messiah, right? And then there are Christians who claim to be the Messiah, and then there are Islamic teachers that claim to be the Messiah, okay? So let's do a couple of these. You ever hear, shaker furniture, Don't we love that? Oh, I love the simplicity of design. The shaker chairs, the shaker furniture. Let's get rid of all of my furniture I bought at Walmart and get shaker furniture. Shakers are followers of Mother Ann Lee. She lived from 1736 to 1784. Is she an interesting woman? Yeah, kind of interesting. She's from England, and where did she come? To upstate New York, of course, because all lunatics come to New York. Right? And what did she say? We like Jesus. I like Jesus. We all like Jesus, right? I'm the female counterpart of Jesus. I'm the female Jesus. Jesus Christ came first as a male, and now, ta-da, I'm here as Mother Ann Lee. Let's make furniture. Right? So the Shaker movement is the followers of Mother Ann Lee, and they believe in celibacy. What does that mean? That means that there aren't any Shakers anymore. They all died off. Marriage is important because then you have children and then you keep the movement going. Okay? So Mother Ann Lee, she's the female form of Christ. Here's another one. Ready? Hong Zi Quan. Who's that? He is the leader of the Taipei Rebellion in China. What's that? I don't know. I don't know anything about Chinese history. Well, ready? You're familiar with the American Civil War, right? 1861, 1865. During the American Civil War, all hell broke loose in China. This guy, Hong Zi Quan, said, I am the heavenly king. Who are you? Well, I'm the brother of Jesus, the spirit brother of Jesus. I'm a divine person. So follow me. And they did things like, you know what a queue is? The Chinese have, the men have a braid going back. It's a Confucius thing. It shows you're submitting, to the order of the world. Well, they cut the queues off. So the followers of this heavenly king, right, cut the queues off, and they said, we're going to purify the world by killing all the people that disagree with us. The Taipei Rebellion. Ready? How many people were killed in the Taipei Rebellion? 20 to 70 to 100 million people in China. We're not even sure the exact number. 50 million people were killed in World War II. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Right? And so he claimed to be a divine person. Here's another one. Cyrus Reed Teed. He was born in 1839, died in 1908. Never heard of this guy. He was a U.S. eclectic physician and alchemist who turned religious leader and Messiah. Claiming divine inspiration, he took the name Koresh. David Koresh? So there was a guy named Koresh before David Koresh. Oh, wow. Right? And he wanted to base a new religion. He's the Messiah, and a new religion based on science. It's called Koreshianity, like Christianity. Well, that didn't work out. And then, of course, we live in New York, right? I could do lunatics from New York sermon. Okay, are you familiar with Franklin Roosevelt? Yeah, lives in Hyde Park down here, okay? Across the Hudson River was the estate of Father Divine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and why did Father Divine live across the river? Because FDR was the president. So he wanted to live across the river from the president. Father Divine, he died in 1965. He's an African-American spiritual leader from around 1907 until his death. He claimed to be God. Right? So are there followers of Father Divine running around? No, they kind of disappeared, right? And it goes on and on and on and on and on. Let me skip a couple other highlights here. Here's one. Jose Luis de Jesus. He died in 2013, founder of the Growing in Grace International Ministry based in Miami, Florida. You notice they're always based in nice places where the weather's good. You don't have, so Miami, Florida. He claimed to be both Jesus and the Antichrist, and he had a 666 tattoo on his forearm. So he was both Christ and the Antichrist at the same time. It's like, make up your mind. Vote for one or the other. You can't be both, right? Right? And then, of course, we have David Koresh, leader of the Branch Davidians. He died in 1993 in Waco, right? And, of course, today, what's the date today? November 18th, right? Well, November 18th, this is the day that the Jonestown, 911 Jonestown followers of Jim Jones died, right? So, it's amazing. Here's another one. Jones Very, like V-E-R-Y, Very, who's he? He died in 1880. He was an American essayist, poet, literary scholar, and Greek tutor at Harvard. Brilliant guy. He was an American transcendentalist. He's friends with Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he's, a poet, so if you get anthologies of American poetry, he's in there. Well, he had a nervous breakdown when he came out of the institution. He announced to people that he's really the Messiah, he's Jesus. Right? He's buried over in Massachusetts. Right? And it goes on and on and on. 17 pages of this stuff. Right? And let me end this little section here with this one. All right? Here's a guy named, here's the last one listed on the list here. Oscar Romero Ortega Hernandez. In November 2011, he attacked the White House with a semi-automatic rifle because he was convinced that he was Jesus Christ and that Obama was the Antichrist. Yeah. And not to be outdone, there was a guy back in the 80s that thought that Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist and he was Jesus. So make up your mind. Is Jesus a Republican or Democrat? I don't know, right? Right? Yes, Jesus, we like you and everything, but please put down the automatic weapons. We don't let Jesus play with the guns, right? So anyway, when Jesus says, many will come in my name, I am he, he's not kidding. 17 pages worth of them, right? And this doesn't count the unknown lunatics. And they will lead many astray. Ready? This is the thing that kills me, right? David Koresh. You see clips of him on TV. He's standing up like this with his Bible going back and forth like this, ranting and raving. And his disciples are sitting there with their Bibles open and they're lapping it up. What's wrong with that? You have a Bible. You read the Bible. If I say something that's bizarre, you should say, well, according to the Bible, that contradicts. Well, they don't. Don't put your faith in one person. It's not, David, there are lunatics all over the place. But you wonder about the people that follow these lunatics. That's the thing that really is strange about it, isn't it? Right? Many will come and say, I am he, and they will lead many astray. It's worth coming to church just to hear that. Right? So what do? We believe in Jesus Christ, who died on the cross, who was buried, and who raised again on the third day. He ascended into heaven, and he's going to come at the end of time. The last trumpet shall sound, the dead in Christ shall be raised. He's going to come in the east, in the clouds, of the army of angels. Notice, it doesn't say he's going to be a failed rock star with ratty hair who lives in Waco, Texas, who's going to go to the 7-Eleven and get his Diet Pepsi and newspaper every day. Jesus is going to come in the east, in the clouds, of the army of angels. He's just not going to manifest yourself here, at Walmart or something. Okay? So be very, very skeptical about this stuff. And then Jesus says, and you're going to hear wars and rumors of wars. Is that true? Over the last 2,000 years, right? There's only been something like 20 years of peace over the last 2,000 years. There's, at any given time, there's maybe 100, 150, 200 wars going on. There's wars all over the place, like in Africa, and I think there was a big massacre a couple of days ago in the central Ecuadorian central Congo Republic. 41 Christians were killed. It goes on and on and on and on, right? Wars and rumors of wars. And what is it? Don't be alarmed. What does that mean? Don't be alarmed. In other words, why do we have wars? War is sin. You got this? What do you mean war is sin? Well, sin and death entered the world with the fall. Adam and Eve in the garden. Sin and death entered the world. So the world is a broken and fallen place. The world is a place where strong people beat up on weak people. It's a place where dictators with weapons roll over people that don't defend themselves. It's a place of perpetual conflict where everyone wants to be the Lord. Jesus or Hitler's the German Messiah who's going to save Germany, the millennial Reich, the 1,000-year Reich. Right? He uses apocalyptic language. Karl Marx, right? What's Marxism? It's apocalyptic literature without God. Right? So you take God out, but they like the book of Revelation, they just don't like the God part. So everything is an apocalyptic event. Oh, it's going to be a worldwide crisis. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. They want to get people agitated constantly. Right? They want you to be constantly agitated. And Jesus says, do not be alarmed. Why is that? Jesus is on the throne. God is in control of his story, history. You got that? You're not in charge. God is in charge. The first commandment is no other gods before me. Okay? Very, very important. These are wise words of Jesus here. Nation will rise up against nation and kingdom against that. Again, why? The League of Nations, the UN, peace treaties, conferences aren't going to bring world peace. Why? The only thing that's going to bring world peace is for you and me, all of us, to change our hearts. Because sin and death entered the world. If we act out with our human nature, it's going to be conflict and war and murder and revolutions. If you have Christ in your heart, what would the world look like if we all acted like Christians? You wouldn't have to lock your doors at night. You wouldn't have to worry about anybody, killing you or taking your stuff. Or everybody it would be a beautiful place. But no, we don't want Jesus. We don't want God telling us what to do. We're a lot smarter than God. We don't need God. We'll just make up our own rules, and God would really want me to kill all those people over there. That's how they think, right? Shame on us, right? And there'll be earthquakes in various places. Earthquakes are a fascinating thing to think about. My parents live in Oklahoma, and there's been supposedly an increase in the number of earthquakes in Oklahoma due to fracking. Okay, is that true? Probably not. I think what's going on is that we're more aware. We have more scientific instruments now measuring earthquakes. So these are like 2.0 on the Richter scale. They're small little rumblings, But it's really funny. They're like, did you feel that earthquake? That was amazing. But move my picture frame in my house there. Like they talk about this all the time in the news out there. Earthquakes are very strange in that you're in control of your life, right? You're in control of your environment. Everything's solid, everything's sound. With an earthquake, the earth, do you think the earth stays the same? The earth starts moving. Like imagine if this building, imagine that, how psychologically disturbing that must be. We know what it means. It's tectonic plates that are going like this, and then the pressure releases. But in the ancient world, they didn't know. They thought it was the judgment of the gods. Poseidon, he's the god of the sea and in charge of earthquakes. So they thought that the gods were angry or something. They didn't know how to explain it, right? It's kind of the ultimate fear is earthquakes. And there'll be famines, right? Again, are famines a bad thing? Yeah. Do we know about famines? Not really. Our biggest problem is obesity in America. We don't really think about a breakdown of the food supply. But have there been famines in recent years? Yeah. Probably the worst one is the Ukrainian famine from 1931 to 1933, where Stalin didn't like the Ukrainians because they weren't communist enough for him. They weren't following his lead. So he had all of the wheat, all of the corn, all of the hogs, all the cows exported from the Ukraine, and it's the breadbasket of Europe in the 19th century. 7.5 to 10 million Ukrainians starved to death in the Ukrainian famine. It was an intentional famine, right? So famines are usually related to political unrest. And then Jesus says, this is but the beginning of the birth pangs. It's only the beginning. In other words, things are going to get worse before they get better? Yeah. There's a very useful parable that Jesus tells, and it applies to this. And St. Augustine in the City of God talks about this. It's the parable of the wheat and the tares. You know that parable? They come up to him and they go, yeah, there's a man. He's your enemy. And he's sowing tares in your wheat field in the dark of night. Tares are weeds. So peasants in the ancient world, they broadcast the wheat, the seed, and then they wait for the wheat to grow, and then they harvest the wheat. Well, if your enemy sows poisonous weeds in your wheat, it's going to destroy your wheat crop. And so they said, do you want us to go in there and cut out all the weeds? And the answer is no. Let the wheat and the tares grow up together. Why? The good are going to get better. The evil are going to get more evil. It's going to go like this. It's going to grow up together. When are the wheat and tares going to be separated? At the end of time. At Judgment Day, the angels, the reapers, are going to come and they're going to separate the wheat and the tares. In other words, it's not your job to go around and go, Jim's evil. That person's evil. That person's evil. That person's evil. I'm going to kill those people and the world will be a better place. Are there people that think that today? Yeah, there's maniacs running around that think that. If we can only get rid of those people from that other party, the world will be fine. Oh, that other race, get rid of those people, the world will be fine. Or get rid of that other country or something. Get rid of those people, we'll be fine. No, the problem is you. Look in the mirror. Are you right with God? Rather than going around saying, oh, everyone else is evil, we have to get rid of the evil people and make the world a better place. No, you're the one with the issue. You get right with God and start acting like a Christian. That's the message of this. So, has this apocalyptic literature to scare you or something? To entertain you? No. He wants you to be realistic about the world that we live in. We live in a broken and fallen world, and that's why he came into the world to die on the cross. He died for your sins, including the sin of thinking that you're the Christ yourself, or that you're God, or you're the Messiah, or you're the answer to all human problems. Very, very profound stuff here. Very profound stuff. So with that, we say goodbye and farewell to the Gospel of Mark for a couple of years. And so we're going to start reading the Gospel of Luke now. Amen.